Larry, it was another crazy day in the market. I mean, holy.
Crazy. Yeah.
So we had the numbers come out. Everybody was waiting with bated breath to see what the numbers would be from the employment numbers, and we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow when we review Kathy's information. But I thought the market reacted absolutely perfectly for the first hour. It was a nothing burger, and the market went nowhere. And then
Boom.
then all of a sudden it just fell off the side of a cliff for no apparent reason, and then built all the way back up to zero again. So what was going through your mind when all this was happening today?
I don't pay much attention to the market's ups and downs. We've discussed this
Right,
before.
right.
Um, I think, we're in a period of uncertainty. And that period of uncertainty is going to continue until we see the outcome of Trump's opening salvos on resetting the economic platform for his 4 years and beyond. So, everybody who's breathlessly predicting the end of the world or the beginning of sunshine and roses should take a beat and let's see the outcome. We're in the middle of many, many strategic and tactical moves all at the same time.
Yes, and each one of them can have an impact. And
Yes.
they don't know. They can guess, they can project, but they don't know the overall impact. And when you're changing so many different things at the same time, we used to have when I did science for a while, Larry, we were always told only change one thing at a time. Because otherwise, at the end of when you finish the experiment, you're going to not know which one of the inputs that you
Yeah.
changed had the impact. So, but they're not paying any attention to that rule this time around.
That's a great observation. On a slightly non-commercial or non-economic uh, uh, note, I watched not Secretary, Special Envoy Witkoff
Yeah.
last night talking to the press. That guy is such a great negotiator. He's the master. And I don't know if you know this, but he was Jared Kushner's mentor.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
My
When
goodness.
Jared Kushner had to take over his family's real estate business because his father was sent to jail because of this very unpleasant business, uh, the father was set up, but that's a long story and I'll deal with it some other time. But Jared found himself in charge of this empire and really was kind of, like a deer in the headlights. And Witkoff, who was a very experienced and successful property developer in New York, took him under his wing. He was friendly with his father, and he took him under his wing and he nurtured him. And so everything Jared learned about negotiation, he learned on, at the at Witkoff's
Need.
feet.
Yeah, yeah,
At
yeah.
Witkoff's knee, thank you. And so when I think it was decided that Jared wouldn't continue in public service, which I think was a tragedy, because
Yes.
I really thought that Jared brought so much value. And Trump selected Witkoff. I had no idea who Witkoff was. Witkoff who?
Right, right.
And then last week, I watched an interview between Jared and Witkoff.
Oh,
And we should put a link to that in the show notes because honestly, you could see the two were so empathetic.
mm.
They were so aligned. And Jared, led Witkoff through this history of theirs, and then let Witkoff expand upon his own philosophy. And my eyes were open. I thought, this is like even better than having Jared there. And so I listened to Witkoff dealing with the press. He had the press secretary behind him. What's her name?
Katerina.
I mean, she is a pistol. I mean, she's amazing. Anyway, he had her behind her, and he was having these rapid fire there must have been 30 people around them, all firing questions at the same time. And he was masterful, absolutely masterful. So I'm very encouraged by his position in the administration. I think he is, even more than Jared, a master of negotiation. But what amazed me more than anything in the conversation, in the press barrage that he responded to, was his responses were so mature, and he was speaking with such authority for the administration, and he was speaking with such clarity. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation because he's dealing with a lot of things. He's dealing, he talked about the Ukraine situation, he talked about the Middle East situation, he talked about, the Russian, sorry, the Iranian situation. So he clearly was talking with a lot more authority than simply the special representative to the Arabian Peninsula or the Israel or the Middle East or whatever. And so I was very pleased by that.
Yeah, and we're seeing that across the board in this cabinet. Scott Bessent was on again today. On
Impressive.
CNBC. He was did an hour or 45 minutes with CNBC, and he went across a full range of questions, everything from Russia to, I mean, just with such clarity, with such transparency.
Yeah.
Very, very, very rarely, even in the slightest way, tried to dodge because and he would say, I can't talk about that, but it was like, for the most part, just, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We believe it's going to work, and we'll
He's
see.
impressive. Yeah, he is impressive. But, we know a little bit about Scott Bessent. I mean, we've had knowledge of him, and he has a lot of history in the financial world in New York. So, but you're right. He's very impressive. He's very impressive.
All right, so let's switch gears for a minute. I want to come back to the general economy or back to the government in a minute, but let's take a look at Tesla. And you and I were talking about some news that broke this morning. I was reading it, and my eyes just kind of fluttered because I was not expecting it to be at the end of this other press release. And so I was, reading on about Tesla doing X or Y or Z, and then the final sentence was, and for the introduction of Cybertruck in China. And I'm like, where did that come from? So, I mean, I know they've shown the Cybertruck in China, in Japan, in Australia, in Europe. They've been showing it, but I thought it was more or less for, fun and giggles and get people to show up for meetings. And but wow, China, the introduction of Cybertruck in China. Talk to me, Larry.
The introduction of Cybertruck into China is, I think, a very important step because I think it's going to do extraordinarily well in China. China is an interesting market, but one of the interesting things about the market is that Mercedes had this, this position in the marketplace. You had Mercedes and you had BMW and you had, of all things, Cadillac.
Right.
And these cars, they dominated the sort of halo space in China. those those brands have died, pretty much died. I mean, there's
Yeah.
some of them are still alive and struggling, but in their death throes. And China have tried to produce their own Halo cars, but of the Halo cars, Tesla is still dominant in the sense that it retains the highest value rating in terms of sales price, and its numbers remain stellar for a pure battery car. I think that um, Cybertruck will dominate in that Halo category. I think I think it'll appeal to everything that the Chinese appreciate about engineering, about uniqueness, about the pure sort of the sort of uniqueness of it. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, I think it will be will be a very appealing vehicle, and I think they can sell 100, maybe more thousand of those trucks a year in China. And I think that it will ultimately justify a production line for that product.
Yeah. So they would, again, if the tariffs are going to be on the order of 10 or 20%, then putting a production line probably would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they couldn't negotiate on the, you know, I don't know. It has such prestige value and such halo value
Yeah.
that maybe they can take a 10%. I don't know what the duty is. Is it 10 or is it
I have
25%?
no idea what the incoming duty on cars is. I don't think many cars are imported into China, quite frankly, at this, because everybody made them there. They would
Yeah.
get SAIC or Geely or somebody to make the car for them. And
But who knows that they may be setting up a production line for them. Who knows? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
one of the issues is the 4680 battery, that they'll need to manufacture that there, or in order to manufacture it, I'm not sure they're ready to do that. So a lot of questions. Whether it's reality or not, I don't know, but I do think it would have a huge sale in China.
Yeah, okay. So I read this just before I came on the air. This well, I didn't write down the guy's name and I don't know him that well. Oh, darn. Um uh yeah. Oh, this is bad. Maybe you'll remember who said it, Larry. I really blew it on this one. Let's see if I have it just here. I look at that. The X file was still up. Jason Calacanis. You know Jason Calacanis?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Jason Calacanis says the sacrifice the Doge team and Elon are making to save America from bankruptcy will be studied for 100 years or more. A true profile in courage and sacrifice for which we should all be thankful, independent of political party, personality, or personal interests. So I look around and I see Tesla showrooms being fired upon. I see vehicles being defaced. I see all kinds of horrible things being done because of I think the way the press is depicting Elon. I thought to myself today that the way the press is treating Elon, I wonder whether it's time to start suing because so much of it is completely, or whether the right approach is just to ignore it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's getting a little crazy and very worrying. All of us who drive around in Teslas are now vulnerable to this kind of craziness. The craziness is coming from the extreme left. I mean, the left talk about the extreme right and about, the crazy guys and what they're going to do and who they're going to shoot up. In the meantime, all the real, you know, nastiness and physical violence is coming from the left,
Yeah.
and it's just it's it's indescribable. I mean, that we should be living in this time, in this age, in this kind of stuff. To call an Elon a Nazi is just so without any basis at all. They conjure up this idea because they saw him, his stiff arm when he was trying to shout out, I love you. And they're taking this and they are, it is just terrible. I don't know that we've ever had the right to do anything quite like this kind of garbage. And it's very worrying. We drive around, my wife drives around in a Model 3. I ride around in either my Model 3 or my Cybercab, Cybertruck. We're not young people. We're very vulnerable. I mean, any one of this thing could do, either serious damage to our vehicles or serious damage to us. And why?
Yeah. What's the point? What is the point?
Why? What will they achieve? I mean, they're trying to destroy Elon by, in destroying Tesla. Is that they're trying to say, well, he shouldn't get involved in politics, otherwise we'll destroy his company, and therefore we'll stop him from getting involved in politics because we're worried he'll be successful. I mean, you have to think about that. You have to think about that at length, and it's terrible. And, I think a lot of the politicians on both sides should really rein in their speech on both sides.
Yeah.
Because the extremes on both sides then get carried away.
Yeah.
And it's, it shouldn't be done. It really shouldn't be done.
So then we also, in addition to being very worried about you, and especially your wife, Larry, when you're out and about in your vehicles and everybody else that's in that same situation, my wife too, she drives every single day here in Riverside. Dan Ives, though, he wanted to find out, well, what about the brand damage? Are we really seeing any brand damage? And of course, I think you and I talked earlier in the week about that report that came out that said just about as many Republicans are deciding to buy a Tesla that were never considering a Tesla as there are Democrats that are deciding not to.
Yeah.
But Dan Ives went a different way. He says, I'm going to talk to 1,000 Tesla owners. So he talked to 1,000 Tesla owners, and he wondered whether when they made their next car purchase, would it be something that would even enter their mind? Would it be a consideration in that decision? And he said the number was less than 5% where it would be a concern or a consideration. So that seemed to be in that, plus the report earlier this week, it kind of puts it to rest in terms of the impact on the product and or the stock, I think.
Well, it's having a much bigger impact on the stock than it is on the product. Much bigger on the stock. The stock is definitely, a lot of Wall Street are definitely factoring this into their recalculation. So there will be this period. We've had it go both ways. We've had it go up because of the election, and we've had it now go down because of the Doge thing. And I think right now it's not necessarily canceling out, but I think over time it will go away. I think this is not something that's going to be with us forever. But it says a lot more about our society than it says about Elon Musk or about Tesla, to be honest. It's pretty serious. But I will tell you one thing. I traveled with my Cybertruck through the South, from Texas, South Texas, through Austin, all the way along the Gulf Coast. Actually, there along the Gulf Coast, back a little bit north of that, and on 30, 35, I guess. And all I got were thumbs up, smiles. I don't think I had one negative, except for one truck driver who wanted to race me. He said his truck was faster than mine. I let him race me, and then he got caught by a speed cop. That was funny. But nothing but smiles, nothing but gee whizzes, and can I sit in the truck? Can I see the truck? Blah, blah, blah. Just wonderful reception.
So
And your point, you made a point earlier in the year or last year that perhaps we'll see more buyers now in the West and in the center of the country if we lose buyers on the coast. And so I think there's a lot of sense to that.
for once, I mean, I got to get it right once in a while, Larry. So so in the meantime, even as we hear all of the negative, like you're talking about, it'll probably be transitory if we can borrow that word. But we've had three major analysts give either resounding positive notes out this week where they are reiterating buys, are saying that it's now a top, like Dan Ives and I forget the other fella, saying it's a top pick now. And then this morning we had an increase in a price target from 180 to 388. So if these top analysts are looking past all the noise, maybe it'd be okay for everybody else to look past the noise too.
Look, the analysts are no better at this job than you or I, or any of our colleagues. They're no better. Their percentage success is no better than a reasonable investor. I take these analysts with a grain of salt, and they do a lot of work, and they do a lot of, but a lot of the work that is done on Tesla is done as if this were an ordinary company on the New York Stock Exchange or on the NASDAQ. Tesla should be valued the way a startup is valued, the way a venture capitalist would value it. Yeah, it's public, but it probably is in a different category or a different class from a public company. And we need to value it based upon our sense of the product, our sense of the management, our sense of its track record to date, our sense of where its technology is going, where the market is going to be. So we're not skating, we're skating to where the puck is going. We're not skating to where the puck is right now. Wall Street is skating with this puck, on the puck, following the puck. We're skating to where that puck is going to be. And that's the big difference between the analysts, and, all these Wall Street types. And so it's unusual to have a public company this aggressively pursuing, this kind of growth and this kind of startup mode. It's the opposite of an apple. It's the absolute opposite of an apple.
Right. Yeah. All right. So back to the kind of DC news. Almost every day we're seeing the results already. Not just, it's one thing after 6 weeks to be putting things into play, but it's another thing to be getting results every day. And so today we had 3 pieces of results I'd like to have you comment. We had Colombia losing $400 million in federal funds because they're not protecting the Jewish students against anti-Semitic thugs. They lost that money. Maybe they'll find a way to get it back. Europe agrees to spend almost commensurate with the U.S. on military. This was
that's about time.
That was a decision by 21 countries. They've actually said, no, we are going to do it. And then we had DC homeless encampments being cleaned up. You literally saw them being cleaned up after Trump told the DC mayor yesterday, either clean them up or I will. I thought that was quite a day of action.
We should take the same attitude in LA and San Francisco and some of these other cities. I mean, these cities have been destroyed. And it's not as if they haven't allocated money to house these people. I mean, they've spent billions of dollars with these NGOs, these charities. And where's that money gone? Where has that money gone other than to fentanyl in these marketplaces? So I think, honestly, I'm hoping there is a change in the politics of the West Coast because they can't sustain this. They just cannot sustain it. But you know, it's not they're not going to listen to me. But I wish Trump would actually do that there. But thank goodness he's doing it in DC. That's all I can say. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not aligned entirely with Trump. I'm really not aligned with what he's doing
Ukraine.
in the Ukraine. In Ukraine, I think Ukraine. I think the idea of cutting them off from U.S. intelligence is a really, really bad idea. I think it's a really bad idea. I understand he's trying to force both Russia and Ukraine to the table. I get that, but but this is going to kill a lot of people. And it's not going to save any Russian lives. It's only going to take Ukrainian lives. And I think that has to be balanced very carefully. So, I'm a very strong supporter of Zelensky. I'm a very strong supporter of Ukraine. I come from that area. My people come from that part of Europe. I have studied that history very deeply. People can tell me all they want about how terrible Ukraine is and how it's not a real country and all that bull dust. I know better, a lot better.
Right. Yeah, I'm as you know, I'm more of a neutral, not neutral between Ukraine and Putin. I'm just neutral in terms of having enough understanding to really know what to say.
Hmm.
So I just go off of what the best I can of what you can gather from what's happening out there. And they were saying today that, behind the scenes, Trump is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on Putin. And he said two or three things over the last like 3 days that he knows things about Putin and why Putin needs to end this war that we don't know. Things that he's probably discussed with Putin or knows about the economy or about their capability going forward, and that he is he believes that Putin will be generous if we can get to an end now.
Yeah, I will say that I think it's going to be very, very hard to get Putin to a sensible agreement, and even harder to implement a method, a means to ensure that Russia does not expand further if this regime in Russia continues. I've seen it in every geography that Russia touches. Every one of the old Russian or USSR republics, everyone that Russia touches, he's being very aggressive on. I think a lot turns on who follows Putin
Uh-huh.
because I think and a lot turns on who follows Trump because I
Right,
think Trump can contain Putin.
right,
I think Trump is probably capable of bringing this war to an unsatisfactory close. And so, because it comes to an unsatisfactory, I don't think there's a satisfactory close to be had,
I
but
see.
because it comes to an unsatisfactory close, the arming of Ukraine and the arming of Europe is going to be of paramount importance. And I think one of the great things that Trump did in his prior administration, and one of the really great things he's doing now is he's shocking Europe into action. And of course, they talk about what a terrible person he is, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
but he's finally getting them to actually do something. Now, he can't solve for them the fact that they've allowed millions and millions and millions of aliens, people from an alien religion, from an alien way of life, from an alien social mindset into their country, and that is a huge problem. It is an incredible problem for Europe. He can't solve that. I'm not sure what solves that, but at least he's solved the issue of arming the country.
Yeah, it'll
Of
be
arming
interesting.
the
Yeah,
country.
and it'll be interesting to see exactly how they do that. In a way, they have an opportunity to leapfrog a whole bunch of technology that is outdated, the things that Musk has been talking about in terms of battleships and and aircraft carriers and fighter jets that have pilots in them, and move into the modern age of I saw some great videos of that new fighter jet, that drone fighter jet that is, man.
Yeah, and you're making one, and actually there's one of the five you know old line companies that are actually competing with them, but we'll see. I think General Atomic is. But anyway, the point is that, yeah, I mean, there's a change of generation or a change in philosophy you know, of what constitutes an important piece of armament today. And we have to change our world. And, they're talking about reducing the budget for the armed forces, but they're going to have to retool their armaments entirely and there's some brilliant guys who are doing that already. Palmer Luckey and Anduril is showing the way.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the economy for a minute. We've got David Rosenberg reset his 2025 GDP estimate for zero growth. He says he doesn't see a recession necessarily, but he thinks overall in 2025 we'll have zero growth. Chairman Bessent said today, he's a Secretary Bessent said today that he sees a flat economy, but he not necessarily zero, might stay above the line. He says this is a reset. You have to let the reset, take its time. You have to, again, we talked about it earlier. He said this is an interesting thing, Larry. He said what they're trying to do with the international market is they're having to look at the totality of the relationship on trade.
Yeah.
It's fines, currency valuations, tariffs, non-tariff approaches like charging you after the product arrives some kind of an additional tax, and other barriers like regulations and whatnot that only apply to goods outside the country. So people that think it's just tariffs aren't really getting the whole package.
It's exploded the World Trade Organization. That's gone. That's gone because the World Trade Organization set these tariffs and were extremely unfriendly to the developed countries. And I think America, that this administration is saying, and it's blowing everybody's mind, is that, look, we don't care what the World Trade Organization says. We look at the balance of trade, the totality of the balance of trade with these countries, and try and understand why. And we discover that it's because they do this internal tax, this value-added tax on everything we sell, or they do this thing, or they do that thing. And the end is there's this deficit we have with this country, and these are the reasons why. Now, one of the things we can't escape is we're a reserve currency. And so we have this currency flows coming in. And, that's something we can't change. But that does tend to, distort the trade balance, the underlying trade balance. So there's a lot to think about, but he's right. And the problem is that when you change this, the counterparty is looking at the tariff. And they're saying, hold on, you're going to charge me this tariff? Well, then I'm going to charge you that tariff. But if they're already charging you more than that tariff, then that puts them to a little bit of a bind. But on the other hand, they're going to take countermeasures. We've seen that with Canada. We've seen that with Mexico. So, it's a game. And what's interesting about it is that the tariffs that Trump imposed in his first term, Biden lived with them. Not only lived with them, he gloried in them.
Yeah, added to them.
Yeah.
There was one of the things that there was a whole lot of things that Scott said in that video that were well worth listening to, but he did mention something that I think in my gut knew, but had never really taken into consideration. He called it the China shock. And he says the China shock was when we opened up China. We didn't just open them up. We helped them in every way, shape, and form to become a manufacturing giant. Yeah. And that helping them was fine. It's very nice of us, except it killed the middle class. It ate the core of the middle class by taking all the manufacturing, not all, but taking a huge amount of manufacturing offshore. And I think that here's what I think I thought at the time, Larry. I looked at Great Britain and how Great Britain had become a mercantile and a mercantile
Power.
power. And they no longer were a manufacturing power. They were a banking power. They were an insurance power. They were what do you call it? Shipping power, all these
Trading power.
trading power. And they didn't care about manufacturing. I thought, well, okay, that's what's going to happen in the United States. That
But
was a
remember,
mistake.
yeah.
That was a mistake.
No, but Britain, Britain's great wealth came from the first industrial revolution, well, really the second industrial revolution, which they really drove. They drove both the first, but really it was the second industrial revolution that brought them such great wealth. But they could not compete with the American manufacturing capabilities because of our population, our natural resources, which they didn't have, the kind of space we have, and so on and so forth. So they were a manufacturing giant. They were without doubt a manufacturing giant, and then America bested them in terms of manufacturing. In a way, we did to them what China did to us.
Yes.
What is so critical now is that we have to lead the next revolution. I call it the fourth industrial revolution. And Elon is right in the center of that. If you look at what he's doing,
Yes.
he's really doing that. And you can name 10 or 20 of these leading guys who are taking us into this revolution. But China, what's interesting about China is that they're right there with us in that revolution. They are working as hard as they are, and they're trying to do it within this walled garden, they're trying to isolate themselves. They may manage because of just the size of their population. And the question is, whether India does the same thing. But what's interesting about it is that we don't need such a large population. This revolution is not going to depend upon the number of hands or the number of, people. So we do have a really good opportunity, but there's going to be a while, and there's going to be a dangerous period where this transition is taking place. The only question is, can we keep the peace?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, of course, over time, you never know how that's going to work out. But I think bringing back manufacturing, especially bringing back anything strategic back to this shore. And I think strategic counts things like pharmaceuticals. I think you should be making your pills in this country, or at
No
least.
doubt. No doubt.
Yep. So you have to decide what is strategic, what isn't, make sure that those things are covered. And then some of the other stuff you need to do as well. You need to be a manufacturer. You need to have that capability.
Yeah, we've proven that. I mean, Tesla has proven that not only do we need it, but we can do it.
Right.
And we can do it as good as any manufacturing country on earth.
Right.
But it's not just China. You've got Vietnam, and you've got Thailand, and you've got Korea, and these guys have they've kind of done a China on us as well. They manufacture, they get the benefits of the WTO open borders, and they don't allow anything in.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So,
yep. That's why it's going to change. It's a reset, a complete reset. It's exciting to watch. I'm enjoying every minute of it. Larry, let's take a look at the market before we run out of time here. Let's find out what happened. I think, just really quickly, we ended up with the Dow finding a way back into the green, up 0.52%. NASDAQ also found a way back into the green, up 0.70, and S&P was up 0.55 at the end of the day. Tesla did not quite make it back. It tried and tried. I think for a minute it was back in the green, but
Was,
it
yeah.
ended up down 0.3 at the end of the day. And in the after hours is down another exact 0.30, exactly the same amount. Okay, so now it just changed to 31 just to make a liar out of me, Larry. The really bad news today, though, had nothing to do with the stock market. What the bad news today was the bond market. And it was going well, Larry. I don't know if you were paying any attention.
I wasn't.
It was going well. It was down for the day. I have no idea what turned it around, whether it was Scott's speech on CNBC or Scott's interview on CNBC, or whether it was the Chair Powell's short speech that he gave today, or something else. But it turned around and it ended up 2.3 basis points. We're back up to 4.30. This is not the way we're going to get what we want. We have to get that bond down.
One day does not a trend make.
I know, but I was so happy in the morning. So oil is being buffeted. So you talk about responses and reactions. So oil has come down. It's still at 67, which is good for Texas Intermediate, barely over 70 for Brent. But the Saudis had said, well, we're going to increase production after April. And then today they said, well, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah. And the US, of course, is saying, well, maybe we're going to put sanctions on Russia in order to get them to come to the table in Ukraine. And in the meantime, he's over here talking to Iran and saying, you better get your act together, or we are really going to shut you guys down. So the oil market is being buffeted by talk right now. But that's one of the things that Mr. Trump is pretty good at, is jawboning the oil prices down.
How do we do on gold?
Gold, by the way, natural gas was also up 2.3 today.
Ah,
Gold is down 890 at the end of the day. It had been up, but it stayed over 2,900. It's 2,917. I'm not sure. I didn't read anything today, Larry, about anything special about gold one way or the other. Um,
well, if the interest rates are going to go back up a little, we should see gold easing off a little. So, I mean, that's kind of but there's such micro movements right now that perhaps they're not going to reflect the trend.
yeah, and
But I
silver,
expect interest rates to continue to fall.
me too, absolutely. A lot.
Mhm.
Silver up 1.2, I'm sorry, down 1.27 at 32.9. And copper also down 1.97. That's quite a pretty big drop for copper in one day. Down, but it's still pretty high up there at $4.71. Um, and Bitcoin. So a
Went
lot of
up again.
conversation about Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin people thought that the Trump administration was going to buy Bitcoin for this new reserve. And then our good buddy David Sachs comes out and he says, well, no, we're just going to hang on to the stuff we got. We're not going to sell anymore. But they had a big crypto meeting today in DC. I haven't heard anything out of that crypto meeting. The president was going to sit in on that meeting, and Dave Sachs was going to be there, and others were going to be. Big, huge meeting. It looked like there was like 20 people in the room. But the Bitcoin right now is down 2,500 at 86.5. So at least so far, there must not be any good news for those folks coming out of that meeting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, US, does acquire quite a lot of Bitcoin each year. I mean, criminal, from criminal cases. So maybe that's enough just to keep accumulating. I know that the Bitcoin that they sold would have been worth many billions of dollars.
Right.
They'd kept it all. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a continual stream of Bitcoin.
Well, Trump did say that he intends for the United States to be the leader, the number one in terms of the overall crypto market. So we'll see how that all works out. All right. Well, that is the content for today, Larry. I have an announcement to end the day with. Brian Wong is going to become the new guru of the humanoid robot space. So he is, because we've apparently Scott Walter is no longer really involved in the community right now. Brian is going to, as best he can, take the place of Scott and really keep us up to date. So the first program will be tonight at 7:45 California time. And at least once a week, he and I are going to try to put together, try to bring everybody up to date on where things are going on in the humanoid space, which of course is the most important space there is. There's nothing bigger than the potential for humanoids.
Exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So that should be fun.
Forward to that.
I always ask you, Larry, because there's at least a chance that you'll have a final word of wisdom.
A word of wisdom. In South Africa, we have a saying, "Hou vas." Hou vas means, hold steady.
Hold steady. Okay, hold steady. That you would have to bring up South Africa at part of your conference, just as we're getting ready to sign off, because there's so much news about South Africa right now too. Maybe another day, or do you want to say anything about?
I made a comment on South Africa today.
You did.
Somebody said something about Elon Musk being a white South African, and I think Elon said he couldn't sell he couldn't sell Starlink in South Africa because he was white.
Right. Yes.
Because they require X% to be historically oppressed people.
Right.
I said, well, if you look at this country, the white people have been historically oppressed now for over 30 years. You'd think that he would rate
Yeah, exactly.
as an historically oppressed minority, as a member of the historically oppressed minority, and therefore should, be allowed to own his own company. But okay. Some people didn't appreciate that.
Some people didn't appreciate. You got some clapback, huh, Larry?
Yes, I don't know if that's words of wisdom or.
Well, I would never accuse you of clickbait, but that would come close. All right, Larry, we got to remind people that tomorrow you and I get together again and we do the Cathie Wood thing, where we actually believe that we can comment on what Cathie Wood said and actually add to the quality of what she's already done. And some people apparently think it's okay, Larry, because they keep coming back month after month and watching that show. So,
wow.
All right, so
I'm impressed with the audience.
So that'll be tomorrow. Thanks, Larry, as always, for coming on. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.